Passage of Scripture perhaps is the classic Thanksgiving text. I've heard it preached on before on Thanksgiving. I probably have, but it's been a long time, I think. And it just appealed to me to use this particular story as we think about Thanksgiving, giving thanks. This begins as kind of an ordinary healing story of Jesus, if there is such thing as an ordinary healing story. It seemed to be ordinary for Jesus, but not for most of us. But then it's not just the healing, but there's a lot more that comes after that. And that rest of the story part is the response of those people who were healed here. And there are different responses that they had. The setting, at the beginning of this story, it was somewhere near the border, we could say, of Galilee and Samaria. Jesus was traveling, apparently going from up in Galilee in the north, where his home area was, going south toward Jerusalem. And then we remember that between those two areas is Samaria, which is a different, kind of a different part of the country, a land of people who were basically despised by the Jews, who considered them to be half-breeds and not quite Jewish, not quite good enough, and they just didn't get along well together. So sometimes people would walk all the way around on the other side of the Jordan River just to avoid them. But Jesus here is traveling through this region between Galilee and Samaria, it says. And he was approached by 10 people, a group of 10 lepers, 10 people with leprosy, a dreaded disease in that time. And it says approached, but they couldn't have approached very closely because lepers weren't allowed to even get near anybody else. I read one place that they were supposed to keep a distance of 100 paces, about 100 yards away, because people feared that they would contact leprosy. And not only could they not get near to anyone, they had to live in certain designated areas, away from the city, away from other people, away from their families, leper colonies, or places just designated for those who were considered unclean with this horrible disease. And we just can't imagine the isolation that they experienced, the social isolation of not being able to contact anyone else, in addition to having a terrible disease, a debilitating disease that just continued to get worse and worse. And as they approached anyone, they had to call out, "Unclean, unclean," so that people wouldn't get too close accidentally. Well, these 10 lepers saw Jesus, and they called out to him. They didn't say, "Unclean, unclean." They said, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." Yeah. So apparently they knew something about Jesus, knew who he was, or at least his reputation, or knew that he had healed others, or whether they even thought they could be healed, we don't know, but maybe they just called out in faith to Jesus, or maybe just desperation. Jesus, Master, have mercy. Have mercy on us. And so we don't know what they were even hoping for, if they even hoped to be healed. Maybe they just thought Jesus might be someone who would have compassion, show compassion and acceptance toward them, as no one else did, that he would at least greet them in a way that other people would not. So, Jesus responds. In a sense, Jesus really didn't do anything, but he said something. He said, "Go and show yourselves to the priests." That seems strange. Actually, the priests were the only people who could declare that someone was clean and could come back into society. Very unlikely for a leper, because that was supposed to be a disease that just continued and there was no cure for. But if they'd been mistaken and maybe they didn't have leprosy, the priest could declare that they could re-enter society. And then we have this remarkable statement as Luke records it. Remember, Jesus says, "Go show yourselves to the priests." And Luke writes, "And as they went, they were made clean." Strange. As they went, they were made clean. They had obeyed Jesus' request, and even before there was any evidence that they could be healed, they went. They went to look for a priest. And it says, as they went, then cleansing occurred. And we don't know if they really had enough faith or if they just had nothing else left to lose. You know, that if Jesus suggested it, they would give it a try out of desperation. But they must have had a little bit of faith, evidently, because they did go and they did act, and as they went, this healing happened. Someone said regarding faith that faith is acting as if the thing that we have requested and prayed for and longed for has already happened. You know, having faith that it's going to happen before we see any evidence that it will happen. Or in Hebrews 11:1, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. It's believing in spite of the evidence. It's believing when the facts are not yet available. And so they went and they were healed. Now, normally a healing story of Jesus probably ends there, but in this case, it goes on. Beginning at verse 15, it says, "Then one of them, when he saw that he had been healed, turned back, praising God. And he fell at Jesus' feet and thanked him." Thanked him. Thanksgiving. And Luke adds, and this is so like Luke. Luke adds, and he was a Samaritan. Luke often made a point of noting that how Jesus helped those who were outside the faith or outside of the community, those who were considered by others to be sinners or tax collectors or Gentiles or Samaritans or those people beyond the circle of respectability, shall we say, those who other people shunned, that Jesus accepted them. And here Luke is making this point that the only one who came back to thank Jesus was this Samaritan, who most people didn't like anyway. Well, first, we can wonder and speculate on why the other 9 didn't come back. We don't know that. It doesn't say any more about them. Maybe they were just so eager to go back home and embrace their loved ones who they've been isolated from. Maybe to get on with a new life now that healing had occurred. Maybe they were just so excited that they just forgot. They forgot to thank the one who had healed them. And, you know, gratitude is important. Gratitude matters. And they missed an opportunity to express that gratitude. And perhaps we likewise sometimes miss that opportunity to express gratitude as we should. Jesus took note of that. He said, "We're not 10 people healed. Where are the others?" Wonder what Jesus would say about us. Would he ask why we have not shown gratitude and thankfulness at times? Why don't we remember to say thank you for God's amazing gifts to us? Indeed, gratitude matters. And so this is Thanksgiving week. It's a time to focus on gratitude, giving thanks, to seriously ask and pray over these questions. What is our level of gratitude to God? And so we can wonder why the 10 didn't return, but we can also wonder why this 10th leper did return. And what was different about him? Luke notes that he was a Samaritan, and really, in this case, that makes him a double outcast, a twofold outcast. First, he had this physical disease, this impurity, this dreaded disease of leprosy, which kept him outside of society. And then he also had this ethnic or religious impurity of being a Samaritan, at least as far as the Jews were concerned. So he was a double outcast. Is it true that the less we have, the more we appreciate the blessings that we do receive? I think sometimes that is true. That those who have little appreciate what little they have, or small blessings that they receive, far more than people who have a lot. You know, in our society where we pretty much have everything we need, if not everything we want, and where we're in a society that just kind of feels so entitled and feels like, hey, I'm worth it, I deserve it, we can just get used to having all of our needs met and our wants met, and kind of forget about gratitude, forget to be thankful. But those people who don't have much, even a tiny gift can mean a lot. This man, even after being healed of leprosy, he still had the stigma of being a Samaritan. And yet he was the one who really got, who really understood gratitude and expressed it back to Jesus. I was reading this article. It was actually an article about the hymn, Count Your Blessings. If we were singing hymns today, that would be a good one to sing. Count your blessings. Name them one by one. You know, you will recall what the Lord has done. And this article says, the greater God's gifts and works, the less they are often regarded. We tend to exhibit a degree of thanksgiving in reverse proportion to the amount of blessings we have received. A hungry man is more grateful for his morsel of bread than a rich man who has a heavily laden table. A lonely woman in a nursing home is more appreciative of a visit from one person than a popular woman who has a party thrown in her honor. And indeed, I think there's a lot of truth in that. This Samaritan not only recognized the great gift of healing that he had received, but he also recognized who had given him that gift. He identified Jesus as his source of healing. Those other people who had been just as blessed, also healed, for whatever reason failed to express their gratitude to the person who had healed them. So, all of us have received God's blessing, God's healing in many ways, in many circumstances, different situations, but we've all been greatly blessed by God. Amen. And so to fail to acknowledge that, fail to express our gratitude, is really to dishonor the one who heals, the one who has changed us, the one who has healed our bodies and our souls. 10 people were healed that day. At least healed in terms of having their physical health restored. But as a commentary states, the word healed in the Greek carries a broader meaning than just made physically well. We think of healing. Usually we associate that with physical wellness. But in the Greek, healing also can be translated as saved. Receiving healing, receiving salvation. Those 10, all 10 were healed in body, but only one returned to express gratitude. So his body and his spirit were healed, were made whole. And that really is what salvation is all about. A wholeness made whole in body, mind, and spirit. Jesus' final words then in this story to this man, this Samaritan, he said, "Go your way. Your faith has made you well." Or as the Message version puts it, he said, incidentally, the Message, Eugene Peterson wrote that. I noticed that Eugene Peterson passed away this week, I think, or last week, just recently. He was probably in his 90s by now, but he's the did the Message paraphrase of the Bible. He's quite a biblical scholar. But the Message version of this final sentence is, "Get up, on your way. Your faith has healed you and saved you." See, the Message picks up that idea that healing includes wholeness and even salvation. So, those are all related. And in order to achieve the fullest sense of God's healing power, we must recognize that indeed it is God who is the source of love, who is the source of healing, who is the source of all good things. And our response is to express that gratitude to God, recognizing His healing of us. Gratitude matters. And that's an important reminder to us, I think, on Thanksgiving week, or for that matter, on any week, to remember who is the giver of all good things.